Who said I was talking about my man? My dude is sitting on 3 championships and is 107 years old, still averaging 19 a game though. He cool.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball and on Instagram at redrock_bball and facebook.com/redrockbasketball, and you all know about basketballmonster.com as well. Game 2's done in the Eastern Conference Finals. We'll talk about that. We'll look ahead to Game 3 and the next DFS slate, which is the Saturday-Sunday slate. We'll talk about all of that. So,
let's get to it.
I don't imagine it's going to be a very long podcast today. If you do want to go back, remember yesterday we had the Brooklyn Nets season in review podcast, and once these, or at least one of these Eastern Conference Final series are done, which I don't think we're too far away from, we'll move into the rest of the season in review stuff. So if you're looking for some dynasty stuff, some information regarding not just DFS slates, check out yesterday's show where I talked for an hour on the state of the Brooklyn Nets, and that will go through the remaining 29 teams over the next month. Okay. Boston, Cleveland, Game 2. When one team's up by 41 points at halftime, it's not a close game. I'm disappointed that the Cavs couldn't get a 50-point victory. That would have been huge. They ended up with 44-point margin, 130-86 over the Celtics, and it was just embarrassing, really. I'm not a Celtics fan, I'm not a Cavs fan, but that's an absolute destruction. When you're down 70-30 at halftime, it's not ideal. We are seeing the Cavs absolutely toy with the Celtics at the moment. Much like we saw the Warriors do to the Spurs in Game 2, and you would have to think that the odds favour both of these series being a sweep. We'll see what happens in San Antonio for Game 3 tomorrow, but these two games were in Boston, and the Cavs just said, cool, what are you even doing trying to get anywhere close to us? It was disgusting. It was disgusting in terms of competitiveness, but it was awesome to watch. Awesome to watch LeBron just going, cool, like this is it, this is done, and we are just dissecting you. That's awesome. It's obviously not as a Celtics fan and not for close basketball and for competitive second halves, but just to watch a bloke like LeBron and the rest of his team just put a team to the sword and just go, you're dead and you can't do anything about it. It's pretty impressive to watch, and hopefully when the Cavs and the Warriors finally meet up with each other, one of these teams isn't doing that to the other one, and we do get some closeness. But geez, it was pretty disgusting from a Boston point of view as well. If there's any Boston people who are watching this, I'm sure you aren't going to be too impressed with that. Tom throws in, who do you think wins the finals? He says Cavs in 7. I say Warriors in. It's early to go for it. I say Warriors in 5. I still think the Warriors are miles better than the Cavs, but the Cavs have been fantastic here, but I'd say Warriors in 5, maybe 6. It'd be my early discussion on that, my early thoughts on that. John Tiet says, why isn't Jimmy Johnson the 6th man of the year finalist? That's a very good question. I'll tell you why. John, the reason why is that 6th man of the year is horrendously voted year after year after year. Basically, and with the exception of Andre Iguodala, which is fantastic, and I hope that he wins. He should win because he, outside of Johnson, Iguodala is probably the best 6th man in the league. But otherwise, they just go, who scored the most points? Now, Lou Williams scored a lot of points for the Lakers. He did a lot of things for the Lakers. He was putrid in Houston for the majority of the time. Definitely not of the level of the next 6 best 6 men when he arrived in Houston. But he remained In LA, he was good on a bad team. But the Lakers also kept their best players on the bench for the majority of the season. Anytime someone went out, they just refused to move anyone into that starting lineup. And you always saw that the constant thoughts of the Lakers people, oh, look how strong our bench is. Oh, but our bench put up this many points. It was like they were just constantly hanging their hat on, we've got a strong bench, even though when anyone was out of the starting lineup, they refused to put any of those bench guys into the starting lineup just so they could keep their bench unit together. And it felt like they were hanging their hat on bench statistics. Lou was good in Los Angeles. I still don't think that he or Eric Gordon should be in that discussion for Sixth Man of the Year, and I would have had Jimmy Johnson there. No problem. You heard me on the award show. Vote for Jim as my Sixth Man of the Year, and a bit disappointed that he didn't get nominated there. But you can't really complain a great deal. That was always on the cards that both Lou Williams and Eric Gordon were going to get in there, given how many points they average, which seems to be the criteria for Sixth Man of the Year. Shit, Jamal Crawford won it last year, and he was probably the 15th best Sixth Man in the league. But because he scored points, that's all the voters seem to care about, and that's just the way it continually goes. But I do like the way that Iguodala got mentioned this time and is in that top three. And if we're serious, he's the one who should be winning it out of that group of three players who are the finalists. Let's get into this game and talk anything about it. Cleveland and Boston. Point guards. Kyrie only played the 30 minutes, 23 points, 3 assists, a steal and a block with 3 triples on 73% shooting. LeBron, 34-7, 4 steals, 3 blocks, 4 triples. The amount of cash you spend up for LeBron in the DFS, it's worth it. He's just going to give you this 50 or 60 every single game. Even in a game like this, he only played 33 minutes. Imagine he played the 42. Shit, he would have been just smashing through it. And you could have found value in many other spots, which hopefully you went for that great value play of Jaylen Brown, because that worked out pretty well. Pairing him with a LeBron. Kevin Love also had another double-double, 21 and 12 with 4 triples for Love, while J.R. Smith played 26 minutes and had 9 and 7. Tristan Thompson wasn't able to replicate his game 1 heroics, and he was never going to be able to score 20 points again. We knew that. A little bit disappointing rebounding wise, only grabbing 2 boards and scoring 7 points wasn't his best performance. But I still expect him to be a decent cash guy moving forward. We saw Channing Frye pretty much out of the rotation until the end of the game, with Dick Jefferson playing the majority of the minutes over Frye. In fact, Frye only got into the game halfway through the third quarter. He ended up with 14 minutes and Jefferson played 19. So maybe we've seen Frye being minimized in this series. So maybe that'll be something they keep going with and keep playing Dick Jefferson over him as we move forward. Well, Iman Shumpert had an interesting stat-stuffing night, 7, 5, and 3 with 2 steals and 2 triples. I did put out a tweet today saying that jump shooting teams can't win in the playoffs, and I was obviously 100% sarcastic with that. It was just me, I guess, biting back at the dickheads that get employed in certain areas to say that sort of stuff, when the Cavs are one of the best jump shooting teams of all time, as are the Warriors. And we saw it here, that the Cavs shot 49% from 3 on 39 attempts. They are a jump shooting team. The Warriors are a jump shooting team. A jump shooting team is winning the championship this year, much like they did last year, much like they did the year before, much like they did the year before, much like they did the year before, much like they've won pretty much every season since back when the Lakers won. I think was the last time that a non-jump shooting team really won the championship. So that's that was my tweet. If anyone saw that and thought that I'd gone off my rocker. Onto the Celtics. Brad Stevens made that change to his starting lineup as predicted. Amir Johnson out of the rotation. Gerald Green in. Continues to get it wrong. Brad, he continues to get that spot wrong. Gerald Green is not the answer to anybody's question, unless the question is, who is a old player who is shit and is still starting in the NBA? Gerald Green is the answer to that question. There's no need for him to be playing. Amir Johnson was terrible. There was no need for him to play. And then at halftime, the same switcheroo happened. You can give me whatever bullshit you want. Oh, you got to keep these guys with the second unit. When you go and look at NBA lineups and units, the way that these coaches run units, to me, they overcomplicate things. Teams run 400 plus different units throughout the season. But to me, you want your best players to play the most minutes together. Seems common sense. And the lineups that almost invariably play the most minutes together are the ones that start, because they get 6 minutes at the start of the first quarter, 6 minutes at the start of the third quarter. In general, maybe they play 8 or 9 minutes. So to me, I would put Jaylen Brown in there. I would put Marcus Smart in there. I would put Kelly Olynyk in there. I would put one of these guys in there so they can play with the better players and not let yourself get smacked to start every single game, which is happening basically every game that Boston plays. We saw it through the Wizards series. There was maybe one game where they got up big early on, but otherwise they just get smacked early. In these 2 games against Cleveland, smacked early. You can still play Marcus Smart with your bench unit. You can still play Jaylen Brown with your bench unit. But after that first 6 minutes, it's a free-for-all that the coaches will use 15, 20, 30 lineups during the game. People are switched all over the place. It's not hockey lines. It's not line 1, line 2. It's not 5 guys and another 5 guys come off the bench. Everything gets mixed up. But the place that you can actually control things is when you start. And when you're getting consistently smacked at the start of every game, maybe stop putting the shittest player on your roster in there to start with Gerald Green. Something has to change. I don't know if they go back to Amir in Game 3. I don't know if they go to stick with Gerald Green. Regardless, it's not working and it hasn't worked through the entirety of the playoffs. And surely Brad Stevens must be able to realise this. As for Jaylen Brown, he was fantastic again. 24 minutes, 19 points, 4 rebounds and 2 steals. Been super impressed with him this season. Much better than I anticipated that he would be. Really, really bright future for him ahead. And Marcus Smart, what a weird line from Smart. 25 minutes, missed all 6 of his shots, had 4 points, but in true Marcus Smart style, had 5 boards, 7 assists, 1 steal and 1 block. So contributes. Puts up those numbers without scoring. And at some point, he is going to hit a shot. It might not happen all that often, and it might not happen very, very often at all. But what he's doing, it's consistent. 22 points for Smart on FanDuel, and he's been paying $5,000. That's not far off from a guy that doesn't hit a single field goal. It's not bad, and I think that'll continue to be the case. Now, seen a couple of questions firing here from some of these guys. Steve Smith's asking about the Lakers. I will talk about that with the Lakers when we do the Lakers show later on. Kevin Carlson, if you were Stevens, what adjustments would you consider for Game 3? Get Gerald Green out. I would start Brown or I would start Smart. It's simple as that. That to me, at least so you just don't get pummeled in the first 5 minutes. And maybe you still will, but that is the move that I would make. None of this Amir, Gerald Green change around. It's bullshit. Al Horford, 11, 5 and 2 in 27 minutes. Didn't play much, didn't need to. The game was over. And Isaiah Thomas with a hip strain. We don't know Isaiah's status moving forward for Sunday's game. Obviously, if he is out, there's going to be there's already going to be problems, but there's going to be massive problems if he doesn't happen to play. But that's really going to elevate what Smart can do and obviously give a bump for Rozier. Avery Bradley had 13 points, but it took him 17 shots to get there. And I was interested to see that Jonas Jerebko was back in the rotation. I think that he should play over Green and over Amir Johnson. He had 4, 2 and 2 in his 16 minutes. He played more than Amir, and I think that he should be a bigger part of what we've seen. He hasn't barely played in the last couple of weeks, and that's disappointing to me. We also saw Tyler Zeller have 8 and 4 in his 14 minutes. What we're going to do now, we've given little bits of chatter about this Game 3 from San Antonio and Golden State. We still don't know if Kawhi is playing, if Andre Iguodala is playing, or if Zaza Pachulia is playing. And, I've talked about in abstract, I guess, what happens if those guys are in or out. I'm going to go through and do a preview of that game, assuming that all 3 of those players are out. So who is really getting the significant bumps in that game? If we start by looking at FanDuel, to do that, I just bring up my screen. All right, so we're talking Game 3 here, back in San Antonio, which the Warriors are favored by 6.5, and the total is 213.5 points. And we're assuming that Kawhi with his ankle, Iguodala with his knee, and Zaza with his heel are all out. For my money, I think they all play. But I've given my thoughts on that over the last couple of podcasts. Today, we're going to really go through and talk about what happens if these guys are out and how the value sort of looks. There's a lot of guys that change in their value if this happens. Obviously, the guy I really look at is Kyle Anderson at 2,500. He gains a significant chunk of value. On DraftKings, he's at 3,100, so that's not quite where it needs to be. But Game 2, he had 24 points. So 24 points at 3,100. I'm happy with that. On FanDuel, 24 points at 2,500. I absolutely love that one. So I do like Kyle Anderson a lot if Kawhi is out. The good thing is we're starting this slate now for Saturday, Sunday. We're going to know if Kawhi is in or Iguodala is in. But Anderson's the guy we look at. I also like DeJounte Murray at 2,600. We've seen him get extra minutes at 3,500 for him on DraftKings. I'm not so interested there. While Manu at 3,000, I wouldn't be too bothered by the 3.5 points he put up in game 2. He played 5 minutes, the game was over, and Pop said, cool, Manu, don't even bother. Let's see how you go for game 3. Let's just take a seat here. Dwayne Dedmon's an interesting one at $2,000. If Kawhi is out, we know David Lee can't play. We know that Pau Gasol has been struggling, and Dedmon did some good things in game 2. Now, whether Pop goes back to him, I'm not 100% sure, but at $2,000, if Kawhi is out, I think if Kawhi is in, Dedmon's not a good option. But if Kawhi is out, I don't hate using Dedmon in a GPP and seeing what he can do, because he was a key factor, I thought, in game 2. I thought he played well, and again, David Lee is shithouse, and he has been shithouse for the majority of this season or this series. John Simmons at 4,300 on FanDuel is pretty strong if Kawhi is out. At 52 for John over on FanDuel, I'm not as interested in that. I think that you could look at it as a cash guy, but I don't think there's a massive amount of upside at 5,200, whereas Simmons at 43 on FanDuel is good for both of those. While LaMarcus Aldridge was horrible in game 2, but if Kawhi is out, you would hope that he does a little bit more than the 20 points that he put up in the last one. At $8,000, he's not a great investment. 76 for him on DraftKings does help just a little bit, but yeah, he's one of the guys at the higher prices that gets a bump. If all these guys are out, my hesitancy on players like Steph and KD and Draymond, and to a degree Aldridge, but not quite as much, because he gets the bump as well as the blowout cut. But guys like Steph and KD, like this game could be over real quickly, and they, instead of playing 37 minutes, might play 31, and that reduces them. Now the prices for those guys on FanDuel is a lot higher, so the risk is higher. At 91 for Curry on DraftKings, and Durant at 10-1. Well, he falls into a little bit risky, but Curry at 91 on DraftKings I think is a pretty good play, even if the game happens to be a blowout and Kawhi Leonard isn't anywhere to be seen. The other guy that gets a boost, obviously, is Pat McCaw, but they've on FanDuel, they've bumped him to 3,500. I suppose because he did have the 33 points in game 2, but 3,500 for Pat McCaw is not screaming great value. On DraftKings, on the other hand, it does. At $2,000, it's supreme value. If we have Iguodala out of action, you would assume that McCaw goes back in, plays those same minutes, and, well, he won't necessarily get the 36 that he had. I'm pretty confident he gets 10, 12, 15 even. And that's a tremendous amount of value back. So if we have Iguodala out, you do really have to like McCaw at 2,000. You like him a bit less. As I said, a bit less over on FanDuel at 3,500, but on DraftKings, you absolutely enjoy that. And Matty Barnes and JaVale McGee, if Zaza is out, I think that you can look at both of those players. Barnes at 1,500, much more appealing than McGee at 4,000. I'd hate to use McGee in cash at that price, maybe in a tournament, but I wouldn't be feeling super pumped to get my JaVale McGee on at that point. Let's move on to the next game. As I said, if you want to hear me talk about what I think about that game, if all those guys play, we talked about that in a number of podcasts already. Let's look now at game 3 of Boston and Cleveland. We are back in Cleveland. So what are they going to win by? 80, 90? They just won by 50 points in Boston in game 2. No spread currently out for this one. The injury, obviously, we need to pay attention to is Isaiah Thomas. If he is out, you have to love Marcus Smart. In fact, you should smash the shit out of Marcus Smart if Isaiah happens to be out, if we hear any more information. At this point, I think there's a fair chance that Thomas doesn't play in game 3, and Smart, you just have to destroy him at that sort of a salary if Isaiah happens to be out. As for Terry Rozier at 2,300, well, he gets a significant boost as well if we do have Isaiah Thomas sitting. So they're the two guys that you want to look at in that situation. Obviously, Al Horford, Jay Crowder, Avery Bradley also get a bump in their usage if Isaiah Thomas is out, and that will help them bring back some of the value that they should have. Let's look at it. If Isaiah plays at 9,200 in Cleveland, yeah, and look, if he plays, I think he still will be slightly hobbled, so I'm not 100% in on Thomas. I still think that using a guy like a Shawnee Livingston as your point guard and pairing that maybe with a Kyrie or a Steph over on DraftKings as well might be a better way to go. But 9.2 for Thomas on FanDuel doesn't feel strong. 84 for him on DraftKings is, I think it's a really good tournament option. If he plays, his ownership will be low, and he's got a pretty comfortable path to beat that sort of a price on DraftKings, but I wouldn't be trusting him to be used in a cash game play unless we have confirmation that he is ready to go, which obviously we don't have at the moment. Kyrie's at 88 on FanDuel. I really like that price for Kyrie. Back at home, you get your 40s, 42s. I think that's a decent spot to use him in, and he is at 85 on DraftKings again. Pretty solid, and with the uncertainty around Isaiah and the uncertainty around how many minutes Steph will actually play, especially on FanDuel, I think that Kyrie at that sort of price is pretty good to look at. In a tournament, you probably look more at Steph, just say, hey, if he keeps it close, Steph's got the ability to go for 60 a little bit more. But I guess, and it depends who else you've got in your lineup, because we're talking about a $1,200 difference between the two, and that might be the difference between taking a good option somewhere else and a shithouse one. So that's another way that you should look at that. Gerald Green at 2,100. He hit some threes tonight. I'm not 100% convinced that he actually starts. He didn't start the second half of this game. I'd look at it as a tournament, but his upside is low. His floor is low. His basketball reliability is low. So none of those things add up to say Gerald Green is a great option. Love Marcus Smart at 51. Yes, you've said that plenty of times. And Avery Bradley at 65. That probably just gets more interesting if Thomas is out. At 5,900 for Braddles over on DraftKings. I think that's a better situation for him. Over there, it's not the not the best, but it's still it's a much better option for Braddles over on DraftKings than what it is over on FanDuel. At small forward, we go back to Jaylen Brown again, 2,100. To me, that's a lock-in sort of situation. Him and the LeBron combination is a great small forward duo. 2,100 for Jaylen, smashed through that again today. That's 2 or 3 games in a row he smashed through that, while LeBron at 12.5 just continues to rack up numbers in stupid amounts. Jay Crowder at 6.3 is a way that you can go to, I guess, differentiate yourself from the Brown-LeBron combo. It's not the way I would go, but it is a direction you can move. But I'm clearly not loving that, as you can tell. Dick Jefferson, nah. Power forward Kevin Love, well, he's been strong in the 2 games in Boston. He's at 7,500. Yeah, if you don't feel confident with Aldridge, which 100% you can not feel that. Love is a little bit cheaper, and he's outperformed him so far in the conference final. So 7,500 for Kevin Love is all right. I wouldn't be looking at and locking it as my strong play straight off, but there is something to be said from looking at him. And at center, Tristan Thompson, I think he can bounce back from a down performance today at 5,100. He is a decent play at that spot. Much prefer to spend the 5,100 on Tristan than go 8,000 on Al. Everything for me, just so I can get LeBron in at that 12.5 price. I've really got to build around LeBron James in these DFS slates, in my opinion. Kelly Olynyk at 4,800. I just don't see it happening. I talked about him against the Cavs. I don't really see him being able to have huge amounts of success against Cleveland. Yes, he's still better than Tyler Zeller. Yes, he's still better than Amir Johnson, but we know the way that Brad Stevens misuses him majority of the time, and that doesn't give me great confidence in being able to use him in most situations. All right, that just about does us. Hopefully we get a game that's competitive tomorrow. Hopefully Kawhi plays. But remember, there's a ton of value that can open up in that Golden State San Antonio game. McCaw, Kyle Anderson, who else am I thinking? John Simmons, all those guys, the value can open. DeJounte Murray, not keen. I didn't talk about Pat Mills. Not that keen on Pat Mills. I think he'd be okay. I'm not super keen on him. I'd only look at him as a tournament guy. And Kawhi could be interesting if he happens to play. I think he's a little bit highly priced over on FanDuel though, but he could be an interesting guy, especially with his DraftKings pricing. And if Kawhi does play, that brings Steph and Durant very, very firmly into cash consideration. And it makes some pretty strong cash guys as well, I believe, although I'd much rather have the LeBron-Jalen combination than have Kevin Durant at small forward. And I'd take LeBron-Jalen, go with Steph at point guard. I think that's a better way to go about it. Got a bunch of people chatting here in the comments. I don't know if there's any questions that have come through, so let's just have a quick look here. Steve Smith says, if Leonard plays, how effective will he be? I think you can expect 90% out of Kawhi if he happens to play. I'm not overly concerned about him being horrible or anything based on his injury, so I think he'll be fine there. Carlos Lopez says, Josh, when will you be at Wrigley? Good question. 21st of July, I believe. 21st of July. It's a Friday. It's Cubs Cardinals Friday afternoon game. Pretty sure that's it. And I had a few people from Chicago say, hey, we should do some sort of a Chicago meetup. So anyone from Chicago that wants to get in contact with me, and maybe we can catch up at some point while I'm in Chicago, let me know. I will be there. But I will be at Wrigley on that Friday game. I believe it's the first of the series against the Cardinals on that Friday afternoon. So Carlos, that is the thought there. Sharif Ali, before we go, any Ian Clark thoughts? If Iguodala is out, Clark is a tournament guy to me. I still prefer Pat McCaw. I'm not massively into Clark. Clark, to me, is not someone I ever want to use in cash. He just seems to be really influenced by how much the shot goes in. Can't do much else in those other areas. I'm not super into him. He's at $3,000 as well, so it's not like we're talking about a $1,500 guy. And McCaw's at $35. That's FanDuel pricing. If we look at what Clark is over on DraftKings, he's at 2,100. I would 100% take McCaw over him if Iguodala happens to be out. Carlos Lopez says, Josh, what's your Twitter? Come on, man. Everyone knows my Twitter. At redrock_bball is my Twitter. And a throw in here of David West. I don't. 3,200 for David West. I think that's pretty solid. If Zaza is out, especially, I think that West can become a strong-ish cash option. But I reckon you might be in that situation where you're just left with too much cash left over, and you're upgrading to a guy like a Tomo, or you might even be able to move up to, say, an Al Horford, despite his salary to value ratio not being there. If you just got that extra cash around, that might be the way to go. But West feels strong if Zaza happens to be out. All right, I think we are done. This one here is for Steve Smith.
My name is Jeff.
There you go, mate. He requested the drop. We are done here, guys. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Gabrielle Union.